Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. And for tonight's episode, the 3 movies we're going to be talking about tonight are, I can't believe I'm about to say this, the 3 arbitrary picks for the quarter. When I say arbitrary, keep in mind that I have a very long list of choices for 3 movies I can talk about in an episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. I've got quite a list built up, especially over the years. The 2 years, that is. That counts as more than 1, right? Yes, it does. Anyways, I've got a pretty significant list of movies that I want to talk about, trilogies that I want to talk about. With all that being said, it comes down to the wire, and it's very interesting to me that the 3 movies I'm talking about tonight were kind of the arbitrary, I'll do them if I can't come up with a better idea for this week pick, right? And you may be asking yourself, well, what trilogy could you possibly be talking about that it's relegated to the arbitrary, I'll do it if I have to? Well, it's a very iconic trilogy of movies that you've probably heard of before. We're talking about the first 3 Indiana Jones movies tonight. And I just went on a tangent about how they're the arbitrary pick. I am so very sorry. No, I'm not. We're talking about the Indiana Jones movies tonight, so I can't physically be any more sorry than just pretending like I am. Because in reality, I am very excited to talk about these 3 movies. It's kind of the long-awaited follow-up to the Star Wars trilogy. So without further ado, the 3 movies on our watch list tonight are Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981, Temple of Doom from 1984, and The Last Crusade from 1989. I should mention that those last 2 do include officially in their titles Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, but I like keeping my lungs intact these days, and I don't want to say that every single time I introduce them, so I'm not going to do that every single time I introduce them. And lucky for me, because the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, does not have Indiana Jones before it, and that's what we'll jump into after the break. Stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981, available to watch now on Disney+. For the basic plot summary of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it is set in 1936, where we follow the archaeologist Indiana Jones in his quest to find the Ark of the Covenant. Along the way, he bumps elbows with, who else in 1936? The Nazis, who also want to go find the Ark. And I said all of that like it was a novel concept that none of you are familiar with. I'm very proud of myself for presenting it in that fashion. It's almost like being on the radio for 2 years has given me enough practice where I can present anything and make it sound original, when in reality, pretty much everybody's heard of Indiana Jones. You want to know why? Because this movie is not a classic. No, let me tell you exactly what Raiders of the Lost Ark is. This movie is the stuff of legends. It is such an iconic, masterful, wonderfully remembered movie that it has ingrained itself directly into the pop culture sphere. I don't think you're understanding the gravity of what I just said. I'm not calling it a classic. I'm trying to find a word to describe it that is more than a classic, and I can't. It is physically impossible for me to find one. Because everybody has parodied Raiders of the Lost Ark, especially that opening scene where the boulder is chasing Indiana Jones. So keep in mind, this is not an original movie. You have heard of this before. I am almost sure of it. Mostly because it is iconic. but also because it's a good movie. I mean that could maybe help. That maybe helps a little bit that it's a very good movie. It's a very well made and well constructed movie. That could have something to do with it. I don't know. It could have something to do with it. And in this case, yes. Most of the time, it could be a toss up, but in this case, absolutely. In my opinion, at the very least. But like from an objective standpoint, let's break it down. Let's break it down objectively first off. Camera movement, music choices, casting, performance, storyline, all of that's pretty good objectively speaking. I mean, you've got really fluid and really dynamic camera shots that even if they aren't artistic, quote unquote, they keep the viewer engaged pretty much every second of the movie. We have music that is big band. You can't deny the fact that you've heard the Indiana Jones theme about 50 million times. I would argue that I may have even heard it more than Star Wars on certain occasions in my life. We also have acting. I mean, does anybody remember Indiana Jones for having a bad acting performance from any of the characters? No? I mean, the next movie? Sure. This one? No. I've never heard anybody criticize it. Maybe I haven't gone looking for criticism, but I mean, have you seen anybody parody it because they think it's bad acting? No. They usually just put whoever they can into the role of Indiana Jones. That doesn't mean that Harrison Ford did a bad job. That just means that he's kind of a blank slate that you can put any character into because of the scene's iconic nature, right? It doesn't make him bad. Okay, so we've broken down those things. I've already forgotten what the fourth thing I said was, because I've gotten so wrapped up in talking about the other parts that are so good about it that I'm just going to kind of leave it off to the side now. And we're going to break down, subjectively speaking, some of the things I like about Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I do have subjective opinions here. This isn't just where I yell at you what the objective truth fact is, because that isn't always the case with movies. So let's start at the beginning of my kind of subjective opinion. First of all, I admire Raiders of the Lost Ark for its violent, pulpy, and funny nature, and the balance of all three of those elements put together. It's violent in terms of some of the violence not being exactly slapstick, and some use of blood for a arguably not PG movie when it was rated PG in 1981. Sure, it's the objective truth that it was rated PG. At the same time, I'm a bit surprised that it took until Temple of Doom where we got the PG-13 rating. I think we should have. If we had hindsight, I think it could be argued that you could put PG-13 over Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it wouldn't be out of place. In terms of the pulpy nature, I feel like this movie is a really good exemplification of that kind of mix of old adventure movies with the kind of more graphic novel approach, right? You've got this very, very distinct sort of, I guess campiness would be the way to put it, but campiness taken to a severe sort of melodramatic feel. That feels like a very technical term. So what I'm saying is it feels more dramatic than it needs to, and that kind of works in its favor. And alongside that, in order to kind of not make it feel like a soap opera, you now have the funny aspect. Raiders of the Lost Ark has some really good jokes in it, and I can't exactly break them down because that would ruin the jokes. But just keep in mind, without spoiling anything, there is a moment in this movie where Indy gets smacked in the face with a mirror, and I found that to be the funniest thing on planet Earth when I first watched it. It is so funny because it is so out of nowhere, but it fits the movie perfectly, at least in my opinion. I will also say that for being an adventure movie, this is darn well near a perfect example of being an actual adventure, because they travel to multiple locations. They do things at those multiple locations. It feels like there is a reason to go to those multiple locations. They aren't just going there arbitrarily. They have to provide a reason to go there, and they provide a reason to go there. It sounds so simple on paper, and yet you have to be able to do it right in order for it to work. And they did it so right that it works perfectly. What else? Oh, yes. Like I said earlier, I personally really like the casting choice of Harrison Ford. I think he was perfectly cast. Again, this is my opinion that he was perfectly cast. In terms of a performance, he's pretty good. Personally, I really gel with his performance of the character. I can understand the character from his perspective. I will also say, One unique thing I will mention about Raiders of the Lost Ark that I don't know if anybody's said this before. Let me point out something about it. In order to contribute to that atmosphere of the pulpy aspect that I was talking about earlier, and to kind of back up its identity as maybe being part graphic novel, the color palette in Raiders of the Lost Ark is so good. I love the color palette, and this is probably the first time I've ever mentioned color palettes with a movie. You gotta understand, a movie's gotta be really good at having a color palette for me to sit here and actively point out that the color palette's good. That's how good it is. And that goes to the sound design as well. The sound design is so pulpy and so deep and boomy. It fits amazingly. Those two elements there are not things I was expecting to praise as heavily as I am, but now that I've noticed them, especially on a rewatch, I can't unhear or unsee them ever again in my life. I love those two aspects of it, aside from all of the other countless things about it that are great. I could go on, and I have gone on, but I think I'll leave it with a closing message here for Raiders of the Lost Ark before we go to a break. I will say that aside from all of the really good elements that it has, keep in mind that I have not talked about the music. Yes, I did. I completely forgot. See, I've gotten so caught up in talking about all the positive stuff that I forgot I talked about the music already. Here's the thing. You've heard the Indiana Jones theme so many times, so very many times, and you've heard it parodied so many times, almost equally as many times. I would argue that even though so many parts about it are so good, I think the music pushes it over the edge. It's a lot like Star Wars in the fact that without John Williams' music, I would honestly say that this movie may not have been remembered as well as it was. It could have been kind of fallen off into an obscure hidden gem. It could have been not working at all. It could have not worked. But John Williams' music is definitely the thing that pushes it over the edge into that, again, pure ingrainment into the pop culture sphere. That fusing into the pop culture sphere. I'm not using proper grammar right now, but I do not care. The music is part of the reason this movie is so good and so memorable. And that's probably why that could be part of the reason why I don't like the next movie we're talking about, because it doesn't use the iconic music as much as it should have, in my opinion, and that will be Temple of Doom. Stick around after the break. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Temple of Doom from 1984, available to watch now on Disney+. For the basic plot summary of Temple of Doom, back in 1935, Indiana Jones escapes to India after escaping China, or more so, he just ends up in India randomly after escaping China. At any rate, while in India, Indiana Jones is enlisted by local villagers to travel to a nearby palace as a way to both free the child slaves kept there that belong to the villagers and reclaim their holy rock. I almost said roan because that's a combination of rock and stone. And I can't remember if they called it a rock or a stone, so I was about to say roan. Anyways, he goes to retrieve the roan, and at any rate, so Temple of Doom, this one. Oh boy. I've been warned about this one pretty much all of my life, ever since I've been aware of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones as a whole. I've been warned that this one is I've been warned that it's not that good. It's not very great. I've been warned it all of my life. And I can't disagree with those warnings, even remotely. I don't think it's awful. It's very far from awful. But Temple of Doom is definitely just okay. Why is it just okay? Let's explain. Let's explore a little bit. Let's go on an adventure and explore why Temple of Doom is just kind of okay. Here's probably the first thing I need to get out of the way. Temple of Doom is much darker than Raiders of the Lost Ark, and by that I mean both thematically, both in the lighting cues. I mean, I went off about the palette in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the palette in Temple of Doom feels a lot more limited and is a lot more, I suppose, concerned with reds and the darker colors. It's not as like expressive or poppy or cartoony. It's intentionally meant to be a little more sinister and a little bit more evil on basically the bare bones surface. I think that can work in its favor if it really was warranted. In Temple of Doom's case, they took it a little too far to the point where I'm sitting here going, I don't think it was warranted how far you went with this tone. Because Raiders of the Lost Ark had a really good balance, and you're basically messing up that balance. I understand. Here's one thing I need to get out of the way as well. I understand that Temple of Doom is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, technically speaking. That doesn't mean that they need to kind of change up the tone and the overall feel of it just because it came first. If anything, it would make more sense to kind of make a prototype to what Raiders of the Lost Ark would be, but that never really works. And the reason this is hurting my head a little bit and I'm kind of stumbling over my words is because this movie was written in part by George Lucas, as well as the first movie written in part by George Lucas. And he was really good at doing it with A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back. So when he tried doing a second movie, Indiana Jones, it's clear something just wasn't working for him, and he just didn't know how to do prequels. A lot of people argue he doesn't know how to do prequels. That's a completely different story. I think in Indiana Jones's case, it didn't really work out. And I should probably narrow down some more reasons so I don't just end up in a constant loop of saying it didn't work. So what else did it not really do? Well, I think alongside that darker tone, it's not as funny. And by that, I mean, there's not really enough levity for me to say that I can't really point to any real specific jokes that got a laugh out of me. I can't point to any real light moments, and it doesn't make it feel like a pulp graphic novel anymore. It makes it feel like it's trying too hard to be dark, where there wasn't enough substance for it to be dark in the first place. If that makes any sense, I don't think there was enough for them to go that far. I should narrow it down even further. Let's take a big step very deep, and let me call out one specific thing that they did that I think was too far. Child slavery. It's not good in real life, and it's not good in movies. I know that is not a new fact, but I should bring it up because Temple of Doom involves a plot point regarding child slavery. Again, keep in mind, the villagers that enlist Indy to go find their special stone or their special rock or their special roan, as I mentioned, that dumb joke is more than there are jokes in Temple of Doom. That wasn't a grammatical sentence, but whatever. When those villagers enlist Indy, they ask him to go save their children from being enslaved at the palace. Now, that's a pretty decent, I suppose, motivator to go to this palace and get the stone back because, hey, let's stop people from keeping child slaves. That's a really good idea. But I'd argue that with the tone that was set up by Raiders of the Lost Ark, I don't think there was enough room for us to get as deep as child slavery. Now, keep in mind, this is coming from a movie that had Nazis in it, okay? And I still don't feel that the child slavery angle was earned. When in reality, Nazis were having child slavery. That's how mismatched it feels. That I can stand here and confidently say that, in my opinion, a movie with Nazis was more totally consistent than the movie with on-screen child slavery. Okay, keep that in mind. That sounds crazy to say, but I don't feel wrong in voicing that opinion. I feel like I am confident enough in my own opinion to say that's how I feel about Temple of Doom. It shouldn't have gone that far. It should not have gone that far. It didn't need to. It didn't really benefit anything. And I think that really shows in the story as well. I think that it was clear to me that they weren't clear with what they had with the first movie. They weren't really clear with what they were doing with the first movie and didn't really translate it over that well to Temple of Doom. They were like, let's change it up a little. When in reality, what they had in the first movie was really, 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 really good. They didn't really need to change it, and they went too far with it. And I think that shows mostly in the beginning. Again, the rest of the movie is a lot like this, but the beginning is kind of the thing that spelled out doom for Temple of Doom for me. Haha, joke, funny. In the fact that at the beginning, Indy doesn't really have a goal. He's given a goal by the villagers. When in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's given the goal, sure, but it has like 4 different facets to it. In this one, it's go there, get the stone, and save the children. And then they go to the palace, and they stay there for pretty much the rest of the movie. And no spoilers on whether or not he does end up doing that. But they just kind of stay there. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's, we need to find the Ark. Okay, go here, here, here. Here's the reasons for doing that. Let's go to this place because this. Let's go to this place because this. It just doesn't feel like an adventure to me. It really doesn't feel like an adventure. Which is an interesting point to make because the next movie that we're going to be talking about nails the concept a lot more than this movie ever could have dreamed of doing. So, after the break, we'll jump into The Last Crusade. Stick around. Your Movie Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at The Last Crusade from 1989, available to watch now on Disney+. For the basic plot summary of The Last Crusade, we jump to 1938, where Indiana Jones's father, Henry Jones, has been captured by the Nazis. Oh no, why have they ever gone and done that? Those darn pests. Yes, the Nazis called darn pests. At any rate, the Nazis have kidnapped Henry Jones because he has the key to finding the legendary lost artifact, the Holy Grail. And they want the Holy Grail, so naturally they go and kidnap him. But they aren't expecting Indiana Jones to follow after him. Although then again, yes they are. They're absolutely expecting him to come after Henry Jones, his father. So, it's a rat race to find both Henry Jones and the Holy Grail. Sound like a fun time? Well, let me give you this right here and now. It absolutely is. You may be thinking, wow, Raiders of the Lost Ark was about the Ark of the Covenant, and this is about the Holy Grail. I wonder, does the fact that they're both going after religious artifacts in both movies have anything to do with the fact that both movies are really fun romps and really good movies and fit nicely together and kind of make Temple of Doom look even worse by comparison? And I would say, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that they're both going after specific religious artifacts from the Christian canology, but might as well go with that theory because if I'm being honest, I'll take that as any reason to dunk on Temple of Doom a little bit more. That sounded like a very long explanation for me to basically say that Temple of Doom is a lot worse after watching The Last Crusade, at least in my opinion. I think that The Last Crusade blew Temple of Doom out of the water. This is more of exactly what I wanted when finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's interesting to kind of approach it from that perspective, because if I'm being honest, when I watched Temple of Doom, I'm sitting there going, okay, this darker tone is kind of working. It's establishing something. It's working in its own right. It just doesn't feel very Indiana Jones. And once the movie was over, I kind of concluded, yeah, honestly, it wasn't very Indiana Jones in a bad way. It wasn't like they were revolutionizing anything or they were trying to do something different and succeeding at it. It felt like it was not Indiana Jones. And that feeling only intensified when I started watching The Last Crusade. Like pretty much the first 10 minutes of Last Crusade, actually first 20 if I'm being honest, where we have young Indiana Jones going to an archaeological dig site as a Boy Scout and having this whole mini adventure where we basically get every explanation about every little personality trait of Indiana Jones as a character. I'm just sitting there going, yeah, you know what? This is more of what I wanted. I wanted more of this with Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't want more of what Temple of Doom was providing me. I wanted more of this. This campy, funny, interesting, and very multifaceted story that gets us somewhere and has some merit to it, other than just going too far for the sake of it. Right? If that makes sense, I hope it does. I really hope it does. I think that the fun tone honestly, it works both ways, because going from the dark tone of Temple of Doom actually makes the funny tone of this a lot more excusable and elevates it even more in Last Crusade. So it works both ways. We kind of get Temple of Doom looking worse, and we get Last Crusade looking a lot better. I will also say that part of the reason Last Crusade is so much better is because of the cast this time around. Now, I didn't go into the cast with Temple of Doom because I felt like it was more important to talk about some of the tone issues, but I can go into that later. I've got time. I've got time on my hands. I've got a second show. It's all fine. I can't not talk about the cast in Last Crusade, specifically the person playing Henry Jones. The legendary actor Sean Connery plays Henry Jones. And let me tell you, it is so funny. It is so funny. He is incompetent in the right ways. He's a bit airheaded. He's not very well put together. He doesn't really understand how to go on an adventure. He's just a really good pick that I didn't even care that he talks with his like English Irish accent, which sounds a bit like he's got marbles. I'm so sorry if that was very mean to Sean Connery. I was trying my best to impersonate him because I find his accent so distinct that it's difficult to imagine him having an American one. So I can excuse him for not having one when he's playing the role of Henry Jones. Here's the point. It is so funny to see the restrained and dignified and well-established English actor Sean Connery go into hysterics because he doesn't know how to really pilot anything and doesn't know how machine guns work and is just in a tank and he's like, "What am I doing?" It's so funny. It's so much funnier than even Raiders of the Lost Ark was. There are so many more jokes in The Last Crusade that honestly, it runs the risk of being a little cheesy, but it does something with it that I just wasn't expecting, and it works in its favor a lot more than it should have. That's the way I'm going to describe it. I honestly think that the Indiana Jones series is kind of a series of two extremes. We've got the darker, more grittier side of the adventure tale, the more pulpy aspect. And then we have the comedy graphic novel side of things. Raiders of the Lost Ark hits that perfect balance right in the middle. It hits it right down the middle, straight down the middle, almost perfectly down the middle. Temple of Doom steers into that dark side of things a little too much. And keep in mind, when I have this graph, just think of it being like on the left we have the comedy and on the right we have the darker, more pulpier side. Temple of Doom hits that darker, pulpier side a little too much. And it goes a little bit further past that far right point. Last Crusade kind of gets to that middle point and then goes, let's go about halfway between that middle point and the funny left side. So we hit this really good balance where it's not really all that pulpy, except for maybe a few scenes here and there, but it's also a lot funnier. And it kind of gives you the best of both worlds in almost a way of best of trying to be a bit funnier, but still giving you all of the good parts of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The biggest compliment I could give to The Last Crusade is it almost felt like I wanted to go back and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark again after watching it. In the best way I can muster to say that, it felt like a good follow-up to Raiders of the Lost Ark. That I almost wish that Temple of Doom didn't exist and we just got Last Crusade. It feels like its own thing and an evolution of what Raiders set up. And honestly, with all of that being said, it may sound like I would call Last Crusade better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. It could be misconstrued. Let me clarify. I don't think that The Last Crusade is better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark is too iconic, it's too well known, and it's also just more of a solid movie altogether. Again, it hits that perfect balance really well, so it gives you a lot more. The Last Crusade is definitely the one I liked the most because of its comedic side, because of how it hits that balance and that best of both worlds scenario. I will admit that I like it a lot more, and I can understand the bias towards it, where people say, oh, it's my favorite. I can admit Raiders is better, but Crusade is my favorite. And I'm just sitting there going, yeah, I understand that, and I'm in that camp now. Absolutely. Last Crusade, awesome. But I will also say that Crusade was a really good way to end it. They clearly had a really good trilogy going. They didn't need to continue. But that's a story for another time, and specifically another time being this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg, where I'll be doing What to Watch Weekends, where I'll re-review these 3 movies, and we'll throw in The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which will be an interesting ride. So, highly recommend tuning in to What to Watch Weekends this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg. I will also be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. for another episode of What to Watch Wednesdays here on 88.1 The Burg. If you're interested in following along with either show, What to Watch Wednesdays or What to Watch Weekends, follow What to Watch Wednesdays on Instagram and YouTube at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, and I will be back both on Saturday and Wednesday, where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.